My sister smiled like victory was guaranteed the moment I walked into the courtroom alone. She leaned across the polished mahogany table and whispered, "You came without an attorney? You've already lost." Behind her, our parents sat nodding proudly, silently confirming that I was no longer part of this family. They thought they had successfully stripped me of everything I owned, leaving me defenseless against their high-priced legal team. But their smug confidence lasted only until their own lawyer opened my case file. I watched the blood completely drain from his face as his eyes scanned the paperwork. He trembled, leaning over to my sister to whisper, "Wait, this can't be right." Then the judge adjusted his glasses, leaned forward, and spoke one single sentence, and my sister's entire world completely collapsed. Before I tell you how a hidden paper turned their trap upside down, comment the city you're watching from below. They say that blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you how easily it can choke you. My name is Clara. I'm 26 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I lived my life as a ghost in my own family. While my older sister Vanessa was the golden child who could do no wrong, I was the daughter who was simply tolerated. Vanessa got the designer clothes, the Ivy League tuition, and the proud smiles at the dinner table. I got the hand-me-downs, the cold shoulders, and the subtle, constant reminders that I just didn't measure up to their high standards. The only person who ever truly saw me, the only one who made me feel like I actually belonged in this world, was my grandmother, Evelyn. She was a fierce, independent woman who had spent decades building a highly successful luxury boutique business from the ground up. When my parents ignored my talent, it was Mimi who bought me my very first graphic design tablet. When they told me my dream of running an independent design studio was a waste of time, she just smiled, patted my hand, and whispered, "Let them talk, Clara. True strength doesn't need to shout. Just wait. Your time is coming." But 3 months ago, the absolute worst happened. Mimi passed away suddenly in her sleep, and the only true warmth in my life vanished. Before her funeral flowers were even dry, the heavy atmosphere in our family shifted from grief to pure, unadulterated greed. I watched in absolute disgust as Vanessa and my parents began eyeing Mimi's estate, like vultures circling a fresh kill. They had no idea that Mimi had left me one final secret promise. The vultures didn't waste any time. Less than a week after the funeral, Vanessa called a mandatory family meeting at Mimi's old house. When I arrived, a thick, official-looking document was already sitting on the table. Vanessa didn't even look me in the eye as she pushed it toward me. It was a copy of what she claimed was Mimi's final will and testament. My jaw dropped as I read the cold, clinical paragraphs. The family home, the substantial trust fund, and Mimi's thriving boutique business were all left entirely to Vanessa. But the cruelty didn't stop there. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, a cold smirk playing on her lips, and handed me a separate legal document. It was a formal 14-day notice to vacate my small studio apartment, which happened to sit on the edge of Mimi's property. "We need to prepare the estate for liquidation, Clara," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. When I looked at my parents for help, my father just crossed his arms and sighed. "Stop being greedy, Clara. Your sister is securing our family's bloodline legacy. You need to pack your things and move on." Isolated and heartbroken, I went back to my studio that night to pack. But as I pulled down an old, built-in bookshelf against the far wall, a loose piece of wood gave way. Hidden deep inside the wall cavity was an old brass key taped to a worn leather ledger. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't a diary. It was Mimi's private financial logbook. As my eyes scanned the pages, the truth hit me like a physical blow. Mimi's boutique business wasn't thriving at all. Vanessa had been secretly managing the accounts for the past year, and through sheer incompetence and hidden greed, she had run the business deep into a mountain of crippling debt. Armed with the truth hidden inside that worn leather ledger, the grief that had been weighing me down suddenly transformed into a cold, sharp focus. The very next morning, Vanessa sent a smug text message asking if I had started packing my things yet. Instead of backing down or begging for more time, I sent a short, direct reply. I refuse to vacate the studio until I am presented with the original, certified court documents proving your legal ownership. My sudden resistance absolutely infuriated her. Vanessa wasn't used to the ghost fighting back. Driven by her own unchecked arrogance and desperate to hide her financial mess before anyone else looked too closely, she immediately hired a top-tier probate attorney. She aggressively pushed the court for a rushed emergency hearing, fully assuming that a broke, independent designer like me would be too intimidated to show up, let alone mount a defense. She thought she was setting an inescapable trap that would legally crush me once and for all. But what my sister didn't know was that I spent those 2 weeks quietly preparing my own counter-strategy. Following a handwritten note tucked into the back of Mimi's ledger, I bypassed the big-name corporate firms and scheduled a private meeting with a low-key, brilliant estate attorney named Marcus Vance. As I laid out the ledger and the old brass key on his desk, a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "Clara," he whispered, looking up at me. "Your grandmother was 10 steps ahead of them. They are walking straight into a disaster." The morning of the hearing arrived, and the Sacramento probate courtroom felt cold, sterile, and echoing with the heavy weight of impending judgment. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my blazer, and walked through the double doors completely alone. The moment I stepped inside, Vanessa's eyes locked onto me. Sitting at the polished mahogany table with a top-tier legal team flanking her, she watched me scan the empty benches behind me. Our parents sat directly in her row, nodding proudly at her while deliberately avoiding my gaze, making it clear I was totally cast out. Vanessa leaned across her table, a victorious smirk spreading across her face as she delivered the exact words I'll never forget. "You came without an attorney? You've already lost." I didn't say a single word in response. I just calmly walked over to the opposite table, set my simple notebook down, and sat in the designated chair. Vanessa's high-priced attorney straightened his expensive silk tie and confidently stepped forward toward the bench, ready to hand over the final eviction notices and asset transfer orders to the judge. He was completely radiating the unearned arrogance of a man who believed this was going to be an effortless, open and shut case against a defenseless girl. What neither he, my sister, nor my parents realized was that my quiet, solo appearance was entirely deliberate. Marcus Vance had already submitted our formal filings directly to the court clerk just 15 minutes before the session officially started. I sat perfectly still, watching the judge flip open the case file, waiting for the invisible trap to finally spring closed on the family that had spent my entire life trying to erase me. The judge adjusted his thick glasses, his brow furrowing deeply as he looked at the newly updated digital docket. He tapped his pen against the bench and instructed the opposing counsel to step forward and review the newly submitted filings. Vanessa's high-priced lawyer confidently strode over and opened the updated case folder, expecting to see a standard, desperate plea for a filing extension. But the moment his eyes scanned the top page, the unearned arrogance completely evaporated from his posture. I watched the blood drain from his face until his skin turned a sickly pale gray. His hands began to visibly tremble, the heavy paper rattling in his grip as he hurriedly flipped through the attached financial addendums. He spun around, frantically leaning over my sister's chair to whisper, "Wait, this can't be right. We have a massive problem." Vanessa's smile froze, her eyes widening in sudden confusion as she stared back at him. The document their lawyer was holding was an ironclad, legally binding codicil to the estate, executed by Mimi and filed securely with Marcus Vance just 6 weeks before her passing. It changed everything. The judge leaned forward, his booming voice cutting through the tense silence of the courtroom, as he prepared to deliver his final ruling. He looked directly at my trembling sister and delivered the devastating single sentence that shattered her reality. The petition for eviction is denied, and ownership of the estate's total liabilities is hereby transferred to the petitioner. Mimi had used the old will as a brilliant decoy. The original cash assets had been entirely transferred to me, while Vanessa legally inherited the physical properties, the boutique business, and the crippling $450,000 mountain of hidden debt attached to them. Pure, unadulterated panic swept across the polished mahogany table. Vanessa leaped out of her chair, her face contorted in a mix of rage and utter disbelief as the harsh reality of the judge's words finally sank in. She had walked into that courtroom expecting to strip me of my dignity, but instead, she had just legally bound herself to a sinking ship. The boutique business and properties she fought so viciously to steal were completely hollowed out, leaving her drowning in over $450,000 of immediate back taxes, merchant lines, and vendor debts. She turned a desperate, pleading gaze toward her high-priced attorney, begging him to do something, to object, to find a loophole. But the lawyer was already methodically packing his expensive leather briefcase. Recognizing a client who was suddenly a massive non-payment risk, he looked at her coldly and stated that his firm's representation concluded with the denial of the eviction petition. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving her completely exposed. My parents sat frozen in the back row, their proud smiles replaced by expressions of sheer, unmitigated horror. They looked at Vanessa, then slowly turned their eyes toward me, suddenly realizing they had spent years backing the wrong daughter. Vanessa took a shaky step toward my table, her voice cracking as she tried to use a soft, familial tone I hadn't heard in a decade. "Clara, please. We're family. We can fix this together." I didn't say a single word. I just gathered my simple notebook, stood up, and calmly walked past their desperate, tearful pleas without looking back. The court-ordered judgments finalized quickly, and the life I once lived as a ghost completely dissolved. I used the secure cash assets Mimi left me to move away from the bitter memories, purchasing a peaceful, sunlit design studio in a beautiful coastal town. For the first time in my 26 years of life, I am completely free, building my dream business entirely on my own terms. Vanessa's superficial world utterly collapsed. Unable to pay the massive back taxes and merchant debts, she was forced to liquidate her luxury car and declare personal bankruptcy, while my parents had to mortgage their own home just to keep her out of deeper legal trouble. Now, I'm curious about you who listen to my story. If your own bloodline tried to ruin you, would you have left them with the debt, or would you have shown mercy? Comment below and check out the next story.